The average Space Marine will not and technically can't have a family. They are the Emperor's greatest warriors, and their purpose in life is to kill the enemies of mankind, not to tend to the average experiences of a normal human. But that doesn't mean it's impossible to create a scenario where an extended or even immediate family exists within the life of an Adeptus Astartes warrior. In order to do this and still stay within the boundaries of the Space Marine lore, we must first understand what the life of a Space Marine looks like. The Battle Brothers of the Adeptus Astartes are not born, they are created. Every Space Marine starts out as a simple human child, usually living amongst the feral tribes on a recruitment world. Throughout their entire lives, they will be tested by the harsh environments of their planets, and those that do not shy away from violence and possess significant martial skills will usually get the attention of the chapter's chaplains. Through some brutal and deadly trials, the chaplains will test their human stock and choose the most worthy adolescent to begin the process of becoming a Space Marine. For most chapters, the average age of a neophyte will start at about 10 to 14 years old. The younger the boy is, the more adaptable his body will be to the gene seed organs that will be implanted throughout his initiation, a process that usually takes about 8 years and turns him into a Space Marine. This will be a painfully grueling time for the child, as his body, mind, and spirit is put to the test. The chapter's librarians will probe the neophyte's mind, while the apothecaries implement chemical treatments to integrate the gene seed organs into his body. All the while, he will go through psychological conditioning and subconscious hypnotherapy. This extreme training will wipe out the child that once existed. Most Space Marines won't even remember their old names, let alone the experiences of their past life. It is also important to note that while the implantation protocol won't remove the recruit's sex organs, the process will make the future Space Marines sterile. The majority of neophytes will not pass the procedure. The lucky ones will die, while the others will become chapter serfs, or lobotomized and turned into servitors for the chapter. For those that make it through the process, the end result is a superhuman warrior, untouched by disease, superior to the average man in every standard. Demigods that ride the waves of the galaxy as angels of death, defending mankind and purging the worlds of the Imperium from the Xeno, the mutant, and the damned. For the rest of their lives, they will not bother themselves with the petty emotions of humanity. In fact, most Space Marines will look down at what they once were. They will not hesitate to kill off entire populations if it means an Imperial victory. Ruthless as they are indomitable, they will continue to fulfill their duty until their death. And even in death, some Battle Brothers will continue to serve as dreadnoughts. Now that we have an overview of a Space Marine's life, understanding why sustaining a family is a senseless pursuit for a Battle Brother, but there have been rare instances when a Space Marine chapter adopts unexpected practices that open up the possibility for a family. The first abnormality comes from the chapters that actually care about humanity, whether it is an ideology that is carried over from the teachings of their Primarch, or they slowly develop a bond with the human populations they protect. These Space Marines see humanity not as weak and pathetic creatures, but as a flock that the Emperor of Mankind tasked them to protect. They value the imperfections of mankind, and understand it is their duty to see humanity prosper. The Salamanders is one of these notoriously caring chapters. There are also those Space Marine chapters that ignore the hands-off approach of governing the planets that are under their protection, and instead take an active role in the bureaucratic procedures of their worlds. Usually high-ranking Battle Brothers act not only as commanders of their chapter, but also take on the titles of planetary governors. They have open communication with the people of their world, and develop relationships with the heads of the important households. They even attend social gatherings, and act with basic human formalities to connect with these people. And if they adopt these prescribed roles to seem more bureaucratic, then it is safe to say that some Space Marines might even take on a wife as an act of formality, much like politicians of today's time present themselves as proper husbands and fathers. The White Consuls is one of these chapters that has a direct link to their charges, going so far to create 2 chapter masters, one that can handle the prosecutions of war, and the other to properly govern its people. In these situations, the people of the planet idolize the Astartes and view them as we would view celebrities. There are also those Space Marine chapters that do not fully erase the memories of their recruits, and instead allow the family and tribal bonds of their past to remain even after they have become full-fledged Battle Brothers. The Sons of Dorn chapter go so far as to recruit from the same family line, and permit those households to track their sons' achievements. When Battle Brothers return to their ancestral homes, they are greeted with parades and celebrations. They have the rare opportunity to interact with their siblings, parents, and extended family. This also allows biological relatives to become Space Marines within the same chapter. While this is technically the Battle Brothers family, there is also another way a Space Marine can have a wife and kids. Some chapters prefer to recruit from a much older stock. While it is more likely that the neophyte's body will reject the gene seed organs and cause a greater number of painful deaths amongst the recruits, it does allow a future Space Marine to start a family before they begin their transformation process, and once they become full-fledged Battle Brothers, they have a child and a spouse waiting for them in the other end. By raising the age of a neophyte and allowing a Space Marine to have a wife and kids, it opens up the creative possibilities to write unique scenarios that the average Battle Brother just wouldn't have. For example, if the chaplains are scouting for teenage fathers, they can create trials that test the young father's ability to protect his family. Perhaps the aspirant must track down the whereabouts of a missing child, or rescue the entire family from a Xeno raider. An unarmed Space Marine may even challenge a neophyte to a trial by combat for the life of his wife, or a chaplain watches as a young warrior defends his ancestral home from invading human tribes. If the neophyte can protect his family, he will be rescued by the chaplain. The tone of the trial can also be way more grimdark, and part of the ritual for the neophyte is to murder his wife or kids as a representation that he is willing to cast aside all familial ties in order to serve the Sky Warriors. Another challenge created by this scenario that can spark creative stories is the fact that a Space Marine lives a lot longer than a simple human. An Astartes would have to see his family grow old and eventually die before they even see signs of aging. A Space Marine's father may return to his home planet to visit his elderly son and sit down to have his last meal before his child dies. It's easy to imagine an Astartes bringing back trophies of war to decorate his ancestral home, and by painting this bond between the Astartes and his family, it gives the Space Marine purpose outside of simply being warriors of the Emperor. Perhaps the chapter's tradition is to turn the family of the Astartes into chapter serfs, where they tend to their father or husband like any other chapter serf would. But if the fortress monastery ever got attacked, the Space Marines would have a more relatable reason to defend their fortress. Same thing with a battle barge. If void battles break out and the boarding torpedoes breach the Space Marine ship, the Space Marines have key areas of the ship that they need to protect, and if they fail, the chapter would form a vendetta against the particular threat that killed their families. Also keep in mind that although a Space Marine can retain his memories, the man he once was will dramatically change after the process of becoming a Space Marine. In a way, the boy must die in order for the superhuman warrior to rise. How that would affect the relationship between the Astartes and the family can vary greatly. Perhaps a part of the chapter's belief is that a Space Marine must learn to let go of the ones he loves in order to better serve the Imperium of Man. And leaving his family behind as he goes on crusade is a major milestone for all scouts of the chapter. Space Marines with family ties also create the possibility for conflict between the family and the chapter. For example, if the Astartes comes from nobility and their family has political power, the family might try to use the superhuman powers of the Space Marines to better their standing in Imperial society. And the chapter has to teach the new battle brother that he must overcome these human flaws and focus on his duty, ignoring the family ties. Since we're on the topic of a Space Marine family, the question of a relationship between a Sister of Battle and a Space Marine is going to inevitably come up. And unfortunately, this type of relationship would require a lot of lore bending to make it work. A Sister of Battle takes on a vow of purity, and much like a Space Marine, her purpose in life is to serve the Emperor of Mankind, and so she casts aside a normal human life to dedicate herself to the protection of the Imperial Creed. Unlike a Space Marine, however, she is not sterile, and so the temptations will always exist in her mind. In order to make this work, a Sister of Battle would need a reason to be on a Space Marine recruitment world and meet an aspirant before his trials begin. We can go through a couple scenarios where this could happen. First of all, we need to understand that there are other orders within the Adeptus Sororitas that aren't just militant orders, such as the Order Hospitaller. These are the sisters that dedicate themselves to the tending of the sick and wounded. A Space Marine chapter could have accepted aid from an Order Hospitaller faction after their recruitment world was plagued with some disease, thus creating a scenario where the two factions could meet. Another possibility is a chapter that recruits from a highly religious human stock, because the chapter itself believes in the Imperial Creed and the divinity of the Emperor of Mankind. This rare and religious Space Marine chapter could even recruit from a Cardinal world, where a minor convent of the Sisters of Battle could exist, forming another scenario where a future Space Marine and a Sister of Battle could meet. The big flaw to this situation is that the Sister would be breaking her vows to the Emperor of Mankind, an act of heresy in the eyes of the Ecclesiarchy and pretty much all of the Imperium. The important thing to note about what we've talked about so far is that a Space Marine has a very small window of opportunity to have a child. The only way to bypass this is through the blessings of the Chaos Gods. Although there are no references in the lore to this heretical act, it can be theorized that a Chaos Space Marine dedicated to the Prince of Pleasure, Slanesh, or the Changer of Ways, Siege, could receive a blessing that allows him to father a child. There is no doubt that this Chaos baby would be twisted and warped by the powers of the Chaos Gods that even allowed such an abomination to exist, but it serves the sinister purpose of defiling the sacred biology of a Space Marine created by the Emperor of Mankind. This type of blessing should be extremely rare. Chaos warbands of the past have performed many sick and twisted actions to create more of their kind, such as the Demon Kulaba, where the Iron Warriors implanted adolescent slaves into the bodies of mutated women and injected stolen Imperial Fist gene seed into the neophytes, creating new Chaos Space Marines. If a warband had to go through this much trouble to generate more of their kind, it can be concluded that the Chaos Gods would much rather corrupt Space Marine than allow them to have children. But as one can see, through all of these scenarios, a Space Marine can have a wife, a kids, or even an extended family. How one flavors the situation is completely dependent on the story that you're trying to tell. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. This was Gershwan with One Mind Syndicate signing out.